housekeeping things. We are streaming tonight, so just please mind your step if you walk around the front and speak up so that your voice can be heard both by folks at home and by everyone around the table. So tonight's workshop is going to focus on some of our continuing development. We're lucky to have Stephen Bailey with us, the Executive Director of Maine School Management Association, to help continue our work around school board service. A few things first. Please excuse me for reading off my notes tonight. I wrestled with how to tackle our agenda. Sorry, before we do that, because what's always at the beginning of our agenda is please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, close shave there, thank you. So tonight's agenda, our last two meetings had some productive moments and some extremely difficult ones. Before we get into the workshop, I believe it would be useful to reflect on some of the things that happened at our workshop and our October business meeting. I'm going to briefly kind of go through some of the things I captured in my notes and reviewing our meetings. You'll notice that I don't use names in my review, not to tiptoe around what happened, but in hopes that we can start this meeting with a focus on behaviors instead of people. In our September workshop, which was not recorded and only had a single member of the public in attendance, our conversation around how we want to function as a board evolved. A board member accused another member of sharing internal documents with the public. Multiple board members joined in the concerns about the one board member in a way that was disorganized and poorly managed. The chair did not stop the conversation. At our October business meeting, a board member attempting to add something to the agenda before the meeting began, and when the item was not immediately accepted, approached the lectern to speak as a member of the public. They read from a letter rebuking another member for previous comments. The board member did not respond to direction from the chair. One of our sitting board members yelled to a member of the public, calling that person an idiot. Many people on the board and members of the public yelled and spoke at once and out of turn. We spent the first 35 minutes of our meeting largely were referencing a prior workshop which was not televised, in which none of the speaking public commenters attended. Comments also focused on individual board members and not the work of the district. I have reviewed my notes from the workshop, rewatched the streaming video from the business meeting, and heard from several members. I have spoken to both of the board members involved since these meetings. While I can serve as their leader and set the tone for our work, I'm not empowered to take action on our behalf as a board. The board together must decide where we want to focus our attention and how we want to address these issues. For my part, I'd like to apologize for not putting a stop to the workshop conversation when it became accusatory towards one of our members. Fran, I apologize for my leadership. I also should have directly addressed the concerns with you outside of the meeting to begin. To the rest of the board, I apologize for letting our work get so far afield from the students. I plan to apologize to the community and the students at our next business meeting for letting our last meeting devolve into chaos. At this time, I would like to briefly go around the room and offer the floor to each member in turn. If there's anything you want to add or say regarding either your own behavior or the summary of our group, please do so. From there, I would like to move into our workshop material with Mr. Bailey, where we will have more time to work together and move forward. In my role as chair, if comments become extended or inflammatory, I would ask you to stop speaking and we'll move on. That's the extent of my prepared speech for the night. If we could go around the table, certainly not a requirement, but if anyone wants to say anything before we introduce Mr. Bailey and ask him for his help, you'll be free to do so. Gary, do you want to start?
I agree with your comments. I think they're well thought. On a personal side, in the workshop two meetings ago, not the public meeting, but the workshop, I do apologize for being a little strident, or maybe more aggressive than I should have been. Some of the things going on the outside have really plagued me, and I let it get the best of me. I apologize to the board for maybe being a little more outspoken than I should have, or not as diplomatic as I should have.
This has been a little rocky start to our school year. Hoping that we can all learn from our behaviors and work together better moving forward, and as a school board collective on the goals that we have for our district, and be a better team, I guess.
Jim, just pause 1 second. Craig, do you know if there's anyone here that can make the fan noise stop, or is that
Yes,
just
you
the
can
whole?
turn the fan on. There's 2 or 3 custodians.
I know it may or may not be
Thank you.
possible.
Yeah, it's really loud.
Sorry, Jim.
Okay. As for the workshop, I've spoken to Fran privately that I apologized for not stepping in. I consider her a friend, and it did go downhill. I thought things were out of hand as far as the accusations being made, but I didn't know what you were talking about. I'm not on Facebook. I don't know what I don't know what the sharing this document was. I had no idea what it was, so I was a little reluctant to do so. And by the time it got to the end, it was too late. So I apologize for not stepping in. I consider you a friend, a valued member of this group, and that's what I'm doing. As for what happened at the other meeting, I didn't get a chance to speak with Fran. I knew she was upset and was going to address the group. I didn't think it was a good idea. I didn't think it was effective. I think she had plenty of other people that could speak on her behalf. And then I muttered something under my breath, which a speaker who obviously, before I even said a word, was very belligerent. And I just put my mom in hospice, and I wasn't in the mood for getting attacked. And so if I had an apology, it's that I was the lack of decorum on my part. But it was a natural thing, and I'm not going to apologize for what I said, because the group that was addressing us he was after me. And I'm not. If somebody's coming after me, I want to come after them. But I did apologize to him after he left the meeting, and I considered it done. That's it.
I think I just look forward to having this move on and work on what we actually got on the board to do, which was to do our school district, the kids in our community, just move on from this.
Hi, Teresa.
Hello. Yes, I concur. Being a new member and only a few meetings in, it was a little disconcerting to see how it did go downhill. And I just look forward to learning and having us all come together and be able to do the work of the district more effectively together. That's great.
So, regarding the workshop, Fran, I am sorry that I followed the path of assuming, without having any discussion about it. So I apologize for that.
Unfortunately, I don't really have a lot to say about the workshop because I wasn't here. So it sounds like it might be a good thing. But as far as everything else, as far as the work of the board goes, I've said it many times, and I feel as though it's a fairly diverse group right now, which I believe is a good thing. Obviously, we're all up, none of us are not going to agree on everything great. My position is I got on this board to help make a difference with the students and staff that make up our district. And that's what I want to continue to focus our energy on, and hopefully not get derailed by anything else. So that's what it is.
Sam?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. Fran, I think we've known each other for a really long time. And first, I just want to say I was genuinely surprised that you were upset after the workshop. I've known you for a long time, and we've had passionate discussions, and you are often someone who likes to, debate and get after it, and you didn't seem upset in the moment, and we know each other, so I assumed that if you were upset, you would have come and said something to me about it. So I just want to first say I was genuinely surprised, right? I thought we were having a workshop and, everybody maybe got a little animated, but passionate people get passionate. And I certainly apologize if, I was too strident. I do think maybe you misheard me. Because Penny shared with me some things that you apparently told her. The past is the past, but what I genuinely believe and what I was saying was that we have ethical obligations to put the children's first and to support the work of the board once we made a decision. And I was not in any way singling you out. I was saying that I believe, and I hope we all embody, our ethical policy that is once, the vote is over, you support the work of the board. I've done that. I would never tell people that they can't vote their conscience. I have been in the minority on more than one occasion on votes, but once we take that vote, it's our ethical obligation to support the decision that we made, even if we don't agree. And so I was saying to all of us that if we can't meet those ethical obligations, you should resign. This maybe is not the job for you. But I was not singling you out in that comment, and I think maybe you misheard me, or maybe I did not speak as eloquently as I could have. But I do want to apologize for making an assumption. I admit it was an emotional reaction. I know that you and Susan seem to be close, and really soon after an email went out to the board, I saw it up on Facebook, and it was just surprising to me. I was shocked by it, and I did jump to a conclusion, and I 100% apologize if that was not you. And 100% it should have been addressed in a better and more mature way. It was an emotional reaction on my part that I apologize for. I get passionate about loyalty, and I hope that everybody on this board would talk to one another as people before we jump to conclusions, and I need to model that. So that is 100% on me, and I really am sorry that you were upset. I consider you somebody that I respect very much for your work in the community. I've sat next to you at town meetings. I remember your husband fondly, and it was never my intention to hurt your feelings. So I really am sorry about that. And I just want to say that I was genuinely surprised, and I wish, I feel like I'm usually really direct. So, I wish you had come and asked me why I said those things, and I would have explained what I meant.
Well, that's why we're here tonight, at a workshop, but it wasn't scheduled this time last year, and that's why we're here at the workshop. Last month was to get better as a board. I think as long as we move forward with, respect in our hearts and in our minds, then that's kind of the path that we should take. also representing our district and trying to set and represent a role that we want our children and community to be proud of. It's been kind of a week. I'm sure everyone here has had somebody say something about the school board meeting last whatever, and it probably doesn't represent the picture that we want painted. I think we do a lot of good things here, and all it takes is that one negative to kind of bring our average way down. So we'll keep that in mind going forward.
Thank you. So, I appreciate everybody's comments, and I think we've learned something that we shouldn't jump in. You know, when we hear something, we have to research it. And that's something I do a lot. I mean, I research, I hear something, I have to research it. And then you come before and say, you know, this is what happened. Unfortunately, the board didn't do that, and I'm not sure why that didn't happen prior to the meeting. But the whole issue is not hurt feelings at all. The issue here is the constitutional rights of someone. Every one of us on the board has individual rights. We're here jointly for the district. We've been elected by the public to do their work, as well as and expect us, through us, to do the school's work. And so when someone positively pointed and says you need to resign, as you all recall, it wasn't to any one of you. He went around to everybody and said, you know, was it you, was it you, was it you? It was you when it came to me. So it wasn't that my feelings were hurt. I was upset that someone who had no right to ask me to resign said it. I mean, it just, that threw me for a loop. And then when I try to speak, to state this is not acceptable behavior because it's against our ethics, okay? And when I tried to speak, I was shut down again at the podium, which I've witnessed all these years. I witnessed many people on boards and councils come before the podium when they couldn't do it at the board. And so this was not unusual behavior. This was something that needed to be said. There's consequences for bad behavior. That was bad behavior. That had nothing to do with feelings. So what's the consequence of bad behavior? As responsible body members, what will we do if the students were here? When the students have bad behavior, we have to take action. I think as a school board, when there's bad behavior, we have to do the same thing. We have to take action. So that's what I was at the podium for, basically, is to recognize that action needs to be taken. Remedy needs to be made. Apology is accepted. However, there's still consequences. So I'm going to suggest that the board considers, we don't have a policy for this kind of action, but I'd like this board to look at a possibility of, the apology is coming to me personally, but each one of us have been offended as a group. The apology should be each other, and, you know, apology should be to the whole board, not just to me. So I suggest that that there needs to be some satisfaction made, because I was falsely accused, and it is, you know, something that can go further. That's the first issue with the board. But what happened also as a board, we did not recognize that the superintendent also shut off public comment, asked for public comment to be shut down. I'm not sure that that's the role of a superintendent. Their role, you know, is to give advice, but they're not about to run the meetings, and that, at that point, he was running the meeting. And there has to be consequences for that action. To take away someone's right to be able to speak at a podium needs action as well. So I'm asking you all to think about it, and what we need to come up with some kind of satisfaction for bad behavior. We have to stop it. We would expect that from our students, we should expect it from adults as well. That's how I feel. And again, this has nothing to do with feelings, this is rights. And each one of us has the same rights. And I wouldn't want any one of you to have to experience, not being able to speak your mind. If it's contrary to other people's feelings and decisions. I think that's what I wanted to cover.
All right. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone participating earnestly in that part of our agenda. And now I would like to turn it over to Craig to introduce our workshop speaker.
So I'd like to introduce Mr. Stephen Bailey. He is the Executive Director of the Maine School Management Association, which is a combination of the Maine School Boards Association.
Craig, would you mind coming
Sure.
over?
Sure, the Maine School Boards Association, the Maine School Management Association is a combination of the Maine School Boards Association and the National and the Maine Superintendent's Association. Mr. Bailey has had a long and storied career in both Maine and New Hampshire, and he is a former elementary teacher. He taught physical education and mathematics. He was a K-8 elementary teacher. He was a building principal. He was later assistant superintendent in South Portland, and then superintendency at AOS 93, which is Noblesboro, Jefferson, Bristol, Friendship area. Damascotta, prettiest towns in Maine. And he was received the National Distinguished Principals Award, and he received the Maine Superintendent of the Year Award. And so the reason I invited him tonight is the long history, of course, his accolades, but what Mr. Bailey is about is rolling up his sleeves and doing good work to make the schools being better for our kids. And so with his guidance, he's able to do workshops. He's what they say, seen it all over his, have you hit 40 years in your career?
52.
Oh, wow. 52-year career, so he has seen all sorts of school districts and students and school boards. And I welcome you tonight, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. And while I start and actually do roll up my sleeves, I would like if we could to pass these folders around for each of you on the committee. Please take a pen as well. Sorry about that, right after that.
Ooh, right off the bat.
I don't bring Band-Aids, so.
You didn't ask him. They next week. Is there a bat? Where's the bat? It's not insidious, it's just a little thing. Where's the bat? Right over. One of them. Yeah, that way. Oh, we're all set. Thank you. I need two.
Well, probably for the night somewhere. Are those Velcro or you still?
Please, oops, the screen, go ahead a second.
Cycle off.
bar go away?
Yes.
Yep, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, they did.
So did everyone get a packet? There's one extra?
There's an extra one here and an extra pen.
Okay, is there here tonight, or did I make up an extra packet?
Oh, we have a full house, full house, yep.
Pass that one back over. Need the pen?
You did everything.
So thanks for having me here tonight. It is a pleasure to be here. I do have done work with the board since I started at MSMA back in 2017. And part of where Craig has said, I've seen it all. I work with boards of 3 to 5 to 7 to 24, both in workshop settings as well as my superintendency in Damariscotta. There were 9 different boards with a total of 29 board members. I've seen a lot of different types of boards, as well as boards in transition, boards that change every time there's an election. It makes a difference in terms of what the composition of the board is, and it just demonstrates in terms of the need for workshops like tonight, times that you do work together to be able to get the important work of the school district done. And I was pleased as I heard some of the comments around the table tonight that people realize, you as school committee members realize, school board members realize that the work that you're doing here is for the benefit of the students and the benefit of the district. We'll speak about that in great detail. I do want this to be interactive to some degree. You have lots of information to present, but as I present information, I also encourage and enjoy questions that come up, because everyone may have a little bit of a different understanding in terms of what they thought their role and responsibility was when you came onto the board. So yes, Dr. King did indicate my background is as a teacher, principal, curriculum coordinator, superintendent, and now in this director position of the Maine School Boards Association as well as the School Management Association. Our hope, one of the things is, and Dr. King and I have been in contact several different times, but I do also want to make sure that you as a board understand that MSBA, MSMA is here for you. One of the reasons I'm here tonight, on the left-hand side, you'll see a couple of brochures there that do indicate the different services that MSMA can provide, as well as a smaller brochure which speaks about the Maine School Boards Association. And we do have some of our more active and more important work coming up in terms of workshops that I hope, besides tonight, you might avail yourself of. The MSMA Fall Conference is coming up next Thursday and Friday, the 24th and 25th. That's another excellent way of being able to spend time with other school board members and learn from some of the 60 or so clinics that are there, with also the excellent keynote speaker we have. On Wednesday afternoon, the 23rd, there is a board chair workshop. That's for board chairs, vice chairs, as well as aspiring chairs. And right now we have 58 folks who are signed up for that. And they do share both their experiences as well as their stories in terms of how they operate to continue to develop skills that help lead their boards through some very interesting and challenging times through a variety of topics and issues. So tonight, in your packets, on the left-hand side, there are a series of slides. They'll mirror what's on the screen, what you'll see on the screen. The slides, we won't use all of them. I use them as discussion starters, and we kind of go from there to be able to both hit and point out certain informational facts, but also to raise questions that you might have in terms of what you would like to have talked about tonight. On the right-hand side, there are several handouts. Some of those handouts are your policies. We did go through your policies and putting together this packet tonight. You'll also see some policies in there that are not yours, that are sample policies from MSMA, and we put them in there because we feel those policies are important, and we typically use them in workshops like this with other school committees and school boards as well. And where we didn't see policies in your policy manual for those particular books, those particular policies, we felt it was important for you at least to know that they do exist and maybe something for your consideration as you develop more policies. So why professional development for school boards? Why board workshops like this? Part of it is just the reason for, I heard you talk about tonight, is how we work together. And we'll speak about that with regard to your functioning as a team, because a couple of the slides right off the bat really do speak about you as the important governing body for the school district. And when you work well together, the community sees you work well together as well. And that's what they'd like to see with regard to how you lead the school district. So our purpose tonight, yes, I will spend some time on reviewing Maine school board statutes, because we'll explain the reason for that and why that's important. We'll review roles and responsibilities for school board members. And I'll get into this a little bit more detailed and in-depth than what I saw in the policy that you have currently in your policy manual. And I'll explain that as well as we get there. Enhanced school board member learning. This is an opportunity you set aside specifically for a workshop. I'm pleased that you did that. I encourage all boards to do that periodically throughout the school governance calendar that you have, so that you spend some time taking time with each other to be able to get to know each other better, as well as to be able to learn and to respect the roles that you play, each of you, within your team board. The other part, in terms of this last bullet, really is to establish a collective understanding of roles and responsibilities. And the word collective, I think, is the important one here, because the more you can develop that common understanding of what it means to do the work, the very important work that you do as school board members, is so critical to be effective as a board for you. So with that in mind, I really would like to take some time to ask you, are there things that you'd like to find out tonight? You knew that this was set aside for this particular purpose. Are there things you want to make sure that we talk about before we leave this evening? Either experienced board members, new board members, things that you might want to talk about, might want to think about. Don't see any hands, but don't be bashful.
The distinct advantage of already getting to talk to Steve, so I have to say already.
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
Yes. I'd appreciate it if you take a minute. I'm currently the senior person here, which is, I never thought I'd ever be able to say. So I've had a few of these sessions, but I just think that new members and the public, it would be good if you could spend a minute defining why we exist and what we're supposed to be doing and who we represent. Our core role and responsibility, because I think, I'm not going to get ahead of you, I'll let you define it, but I just think that school boards are different than town boards, and our constituency is defined differently. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's good to, both for the public, new members, or whoever, to have that reinforced. I'd like to hear a conversation.
That's good, because that's kind of where I start at.
There we go. You can tell I've seen you talk before.
What else? Anything else? We want to make sure it gets covered. Okay, so the other part of this is as we go, I mean, as I get rolling, if there are things that you want to interrupt or ask a question about, please do. Because I'd like to make this, although I know it's being streamed, and I've been told I'm not captive here behind, but I also know that this is kind of where it's being seen. So I'll move around as much as it seems necessary. This first thing, and I'm going to move right into this slide that I think is really an important beginning space for you all. And it goes to the heart of Gary's question, and we'll show a little bit about that in a little bit later a different way. But here's the oath. And once you were elected, did you all have to go to your town office and swear to the oath? And if you look at this, I mean, your two towns, your Great and Gloucester, you swear that you faithfully discharge to the best of your abilities the duties incumbent on you as the school director of MSD 15, according to the Constitution and to the laws of the state. I heard earlier part of the conversation in terms of some conversation about town. But is town mentioned here? No. We'll talk about that in a minute, but in terms of this particular oath, and your role as a school board member, you're elected as an individual, you're elected by your town and in your town, but you're elected to the MSAD 15 school board. Once you become a school board member, this is your entity, this is your team. And you're here, to go to Gary's point, you're here, and we'll talk about this in greater detail later too, but you're here for the students and for what's in the best interest of the school district. Students and what's in the best interest of the school district. And I'll explain that a little further, because what may seem missing to some folks here is, well, what about the town? What about our taxpayers? What about our neighbors? What about our other residents? Well, we'll talk about that. But primarily, your goal and your constituents are your students and what's in the best interest of the school district. So, if we move, you're part of a team. And if we look at this next slide, and I skipped a slide, I'm going to come back to it. But this next slide, which is slide number 7, and it would be on the top of page 3, you campaign as individuals, but you serve as a member of a team. And I'm going to go back a slide now, because that's this first bullet up here speaks about you being the governing body for the school administrative unit. You 11 folks are the decision makers for the school district. You work together with the superintendent, and together you become the educational leadership team. And you need his direction, guidance, as well as everything that he does for what you want him to do in terms of what you make decisions, in terms of directing him to do. Together you're the educational leadership team. But you as a school board are the governing body. You're the group that makes the decisions for the school committee, in the school board. So in that, yes, you are taking into consideration information from your towns, from the people who voted you in. And you want to make sure you're kind of hearing that information, you know, through your head, through your ears, and you're carrying it kind of on your shoulders. Yet at the same time, your primary focus is on students and what's interest of the best interest of the district. So there's this balance that's important for you to play with regard to who you're paying attention to. And if you can't be the advocates for your students, I would say, who would be? You as elected officials, to be able to do the work of the school, that's one of the things that you do in terms of paying attention to, again, the students and best interests of the district. So as a governing body, that's your role. We'll talk more specifically about that. You have statutory powers and duties for a school administrative district. I'm going to stop this slide for a minute, and I'm going to go to another one. This is found in the educational law book. This gets a different color cover every year, and then they add a few more things here and there and change some wording in it. But this is the educational law book, and this is a this is Title 20A, all the educational statutes. And within it, in Chapter 1001, are the duties of school boards. So when I said before that you are guided by the Constitution and the laws of the state, this is the law of the state that guides and gives the responsibility to school boards. Duties of school boards. Doesn't say duties to individual school board members, but it gives it duties to school boards. So you have general duties, and basically one of the first ones is the adoption of policies, management of school property, selection of superintendent, and then it goes on. There are like 22 of these within this subsection 1001, where duties are given to school boards. And school boards are different than selectmen, than town councils and city councils. They are different, and we'll talk how that plays out as well. But you, as a body, are given responsibility as a board. And it's important in terms of, as we talked before, I'm going to go back to my other slides now. As campaigning as an individual, you serve as a member of the team. So part of your work, in your work together as 11 board members, is to determine how do we work together as a team. Your code of ethics was brought up earlier. You do have a policy, a BCA, which is your code of ethics. We'll speak to that specifically. But another one that I wanted to bring attention to had to do not with necessarily code of ethics, but it has to do with a way you may find to be able to work together as a board. And if I can find these, here they are. Some boards, in addition to walking through and making sure that attention is given to your code of ethics, they also consider, and sometimes they talk about it within a workshop setting like this, developing sets of school board norms. And what I have here are some samples, 3 different samples of some school board norms that could be utilized in terms of how you operate. And these norms, if identified, if adopted, just like your code of ethics, it's one way of being able to make promises to each other with regard to, I will do as I can to be able to uphold what we said we're going to do within our meetings. But it would take some conversation amongst yourself as a board to say, okay, what will we decide upon? And so your comments earlier, Penny, in terms of being able to reach out to the board, when are we going to have this conversation to be able to make some recommendations that we then can agree to as a board to be able to say, this is how we'll treat each other, this is how we'll interact with one another as we go about our important board business. So that's potentially a really good place to start too, in terms of being an important member of a team. And again, as they say here, no authority as individuals, only as a board, and that authority only happens when you're together in an officially called and scheduled and posted board meeting. So we can get into Freedom of Access Act a little later, and groups of 3, and you know what that means in terms of making sure that we don't have conversations outside of board meetings and those kinds of things. Those are all parts of what we'll talk about a little bit later. And any questions so far or comments so far? Everything both making sense and we still going in the right direction? Okay. So this next piece, again, goes to a question that Gary asked. Who do you represent? And I did already speak about this a little bit in terms of you are really representative of. And this is where being a school board member by law and by statute, and we'll look at a case where this really is defined better, makes it different than a selectman or a town councilor or a city councilor. They are really representatives for the people who elected them. A state legislator, a state senator, the people you send to Washington. Those definitely are representatives for the people who elected them. But you're being representative of. You're being representative of the large district. You're being representative of, yes, the constituencies you know best, and you're going to bring that kind of information to the table when you have conversation on agenda items. You're going to voice the interest and the opinions that you know best. However, when you vote, the filter you want to be using within your head is going to be on the overall interest of the organization in terms of students and districts. So, representative of, difference between your role as a school board member and what you may perceive as a role of the selectman, school, town council, or city council. Yes, Penny.
Just want to throw it out here before I lose it, but something that I'm interested in your insight on as we move through the night too is this idea, in broadly, how we spend our time. You know, we are a public meeting, but we're not a meeting of the public.
So I'll say it this way that I typically say you are. Your school board meetings are to do the business of the board. You have a prepared agenda, and you also have a segment on it, required now by law, to have a public comment period. During that public comment period, you can limit because it's a limited public forum and not an open public forum, you can limit in terms of the time as well as some content in terms of how it's presented, the manner of content in terms of how it's presented. But in terms of your role as the board, you meet in the public, you meet for the public, but it's not a meeting of the public. Meaning that the primary purpose for you coming together is to do the work of the board. And then you have a designated time period where you have a public comment period where you can hear from either questions and or comments from the public to be able to help inform you or to be able to ask questions of you with regard to what the public is thinking. And then you can take that and put that into whatever decisions or thinking you're planning for, or even your agendas that you're moving forward on. What I would like to do here, though, is, I'm going to ask you to take a look at your handout on the right-hand side, and I believe it's going to be your handout number 18. Actually, it's not. It's 19. Because we just started talking about this with Penny's question. Because this is a meeting in the public, for the public, but not of the public. It speaks to your policy BEDH, and followed right behind that is Maine School Management's sample policy, which we also have worked with our school attorneys to be able to identify what we think is the best one to be able to put forward to folks, which is called public comment at school board meetings. And the reason I make the difference, and I do see that your policy was most recently reviewed in November of 2023, which is fairly recently, but just about before that time, Maine School Management and Drummond Woodsum also looked at changing the title from public participation to public comment. And to go back to what Penny was talking about in terms of the school board meeting being a meeting in the public, for the public, but out of the public, participation kind of infers that it would be interactive. And school board meetings are not set up, designed to be that way. Although you can have them be that way with this exception, this manner of being able to do that. If you have your public comment period, wherever you place it, you have the decision power to be able to determine where that public comment period is placed early on in the meeting, later on in the meeting. You also can, if you so choose, determine to have a public comment on a specific agenda item. If you have an agenda item where you would like to be taking some information and some comment from the public, you also could set up a special public comment period for an agenda item. And that would be specifically designed by the board chair as well as the superintendent in terms of thinking about the agenda and how information might be gathered from the public on a particular agenda item. So that's some way that you could use the public comment law as well as your policy to be able to help identify that particular piece. So that's why one of the reasons I did want to just make reference to the sample policy as compared to what you have as your policy in place right now. Maybe something you may want to think about in terms of changing the nature of the title of that. I do want to have you refer now also to another document which again we feel is really, really important for both the public as well as school boards to know, and this is handout number 4 on the right hand side. This is a memorandum that was prepared by the Assistant Attorney General. It was prepared during a time that the Educational Cultural Affairs Committee in Augusta, in the legislature, were having a conversation about who does the school board represent. And there was a bill that was introduced that was defeated, but the bill basically, it raised the issue, raised the question of who does the school board represent. And the answer they wanted to have within the bill was the school board members represent the taxpayers or the residents. MSBA lobbied against that, as did MSSA, because the major concern we had with that particular bill was one that we felt if the bill passed, what do you think the major focus would be of residents and taxpayers? Money, budget. Now, we know that's important. We know that can't be discounted. Yet at the same time, that flies in the face of really who your other constituents are, your students, and what's in the best interest of the school, and school committees being advocates for students and the education you want to have happen within the district. So this particular memorandum, it did review a case that was, well, right now it's 100 years ago, but the Assistant Attorney General Sarah Forster confirmed what was felt even back then. And the cause of this was a case that was down here in Yarmouth. This was Yarmouth. It had to do with a foster student. And basically the fairness that the town felt, or unfairness the town felt of taking on the cost of that particular student. So in Shaw, this was Shaw versus Small in 1924. The issue was the right of an orphan to attend school in the town where his guardian resided. The school committee denied him access to school because, among other things, they felt that too many wards of the state were being placed in their town, which was an unequal burden that the town should not be obligated to bear. The law court, in ordering the student to be admitted to school, held that the school committee was obligated to follow the law with respect to residency, not their views about the fairness of the law to their town. So in this particular case, it talked about being there for all students, and that the school committee couldn't deny access to that particular student. Related to that is the second and third paragraph of the letter that the Assistant Attorney General wrote. The Maine Constitution affords control over education to the Maine legislature. School boards are creatures of statute, with their duties and responsibilities described therein. The nexus of the concern about school boards' responsibilities for, responsiveness to, and their respective communities appears to be in this statement contained in a decision of the Maine's Law Court, that the school committee acts as a public board. It in no sense represents the town. Its members are chosen by the voters of the town, but after election, they are public officers deriving their authority from the law and responsible to the state for the good faith and rectitude of their acts. So to go to the heart of Gary's question, way back when, this is basically what it says in terms of who you're responsive to. And it also means, though, that you do have that careful balance of making sure that you're not deaf to what's being said around you and to you, but making sure that you're being the advocate, for the students and the best interests of the district. So that's a mouthful, and it's a head full. Okay. What questions do you have? Yes.
I have it on that paragraph. Who interpreted that paragraph?
Who interpreted it,
Yeah.
or who wrote it?
Yeah, who wrote that?
Who wrote it was the law court in the case of Small versus Shaw back in 1924.
Right. So, which I read.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you were right, it does address that one particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
And what has been interpreted through MS, all these initials, all the august people, is that you can't really, you can't focus on the public at all.
But I didn't say
think
that,
there should be a statement you said earlier, the goal of the board, okay, is to represent and do the best for the students in the district. That's our goal. So how do we get there is up to many interpretations. And so what I'm trying to do is explain that what I understand to have happened over these years now is that you cannot, and I think that's a very strong word, because we can, have to listen to what the public has to say. The students are not going to get anything if the taxpayers will not provide for them. So we have to try to, convince the public they need to provide for the students. So it's a three-way thing here. And anything different than that, I think when you come on new, you misinterpret that particular triangle.
So I guess I'd just like to ask, though, tonight, have I said in anything that I've said so far that you shouldn't be listening to the public?
No.
Okay.
But you make it clear that, the focus needs to be,
The primary focus does want to be on the students as well as what's in the best interest of the district. And yes, you still have to have the other, you're listening, you're here. You can't operate in a vacuum. You can't do that.
It's a balance.
It is a
as you
balance.
stated, it's a
That's right.
balance.
And you have to still be able to advocate in terms of what you think is right and best within your community for what you want to have happen within that community. Misty?
I feel like this is my second term on the board, and I feel like we do a really good job of that, because when it's budget season, the school may come with us with their wishes and their dreams of what they would want, or for the school district as a whole. We'll look at the tax impact, because we're all taxpayers. I own 5 properties in Greater Gloucester. All of our increases are going to affect me a lot. So obviously, I, as a taxpayer, I'm going to weigh in on my opinion, and that's what we all do as taxpayers, that we can't go to our public with a budget that's going to increase taxes by 10%. Like, that's not realistic. We don't want that for our people. We don't want that for ourselves. So then we go back to the school board and say, this is not what we want to present, and we cut and we cut and we cut to a number that we are all in agreement on. We place that vote, and I feel like we do a really good job of that by putting their opinions at the forefront, but also making the cuts that we feel aren't going to impact the students in a bad way. So I feel like we already do that really well. And the same thing with what we have coming up. For example, in our November vote, we have a big bond coming up for the public. And we know that there's a lot of positive and negative coming at us from all sides. And when we all work together over the past 3 or 4 years, putting that bond package together, we worked really hard to represent the public. And by pulling in members of the public, by pulling in parents, by pulling in non-parents, by pulling in elderly members of the community, everybody that we could think of to voice their opinion on that project, we worked really hard to have the focus of the opinions of the public factored into that. We're coming up with a number that was realistic, that would serve the minimal needs of what we really need and haven't had in a really long time. So I feel like with this here, you're right, we do factor in the conversation of the public, but we have to make the best decision for our kids, because they're our future. And they're having a good school to come to, and one that's kept well, that's well maintained, is in their best interest. So I feel like we do a really good job of that, and that's just my opinion, but I don't speak for everybody here, but in my opinion, I feel like we do that.
And in doing that, in terms of that balancing act, you may not get to where you want to be as fast as you want to with regard to what you think is in the best interest of the students. But at the same time, you have to weigh in terms of how much can the community bear with regard to getting there as fast as you might want to. And there are some years you might be able to go a little faster, and other years you're going to have to pull back in terms of being able to be more conservative in the viewpoint of what can be withstood within the budget. So absolutely. But just in terms of the representation of who you are as a board, really important document as well.
No, absolutely not.
So a piece that's included within our conversation tonight, and this is your policy, it's a policy BCA. I would like to go to the code of ethics that you have. It's your handout number 9. We spoke a little bit about this when you were speaking about the norms and the importance of the 2 of these working together. But I will say I don't see a date. Yes, I do too. Reviewed April of 2019. I do know one of the things that school boards do, and I don't know if it happens here or not, but often boards, as they have their organization meeting after elections happen, they may pull a few important policies out to be able to demonstrate, what's important to the board and what we focus on. This is one. Board member code of conduct is another one. Code of ethics is another one that typically is pulled out. And I often see boards take it, they read it, they talk about it a little bit, and some boards even sign it. As a matter of just demonstrating to each other that yes, we understand what this means, how it impacts how we work together with one another. The statements are a series of I will statements. I mean, yes, it's aspirational because you try to uphold your behavior with regard to what it is you want to see happen with regard to the board. Letter, I just go through a couple of these, but letter B, I will at all times think of children first and base decisions on how they will affect children, their education and their training. That's basically what we just talked about. There's another one. E, I'll recognize that my responsibility is not to operate the schools, but to see that they're well operated. And you all know as a board, you have one employee, and that's the superintendent. The superintendent has the responsibility and the authority based on statute to supervise all other staff underneath him, obviously using other people to delegate that responsibility to be able to help do that. We take a look at this I heard earlier tonight also. I will support a decision made by the majority of the board graciously. This is one yes. I mean, you take the time to be able to make the motion, have the second, have your discussion about all the important items that you're going to be talking about. And also, just thinking about that discussion time, that's the time to have your voice heard. And parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules would say it's important to try to have everyone take a turn to be able to speak on an issue, and also to limit so that one person doesn't speak on an issue more than once. You know, part of that is sharing the air, as well as to make sure that there's the opportunity for other people's voices to be heard. That's also the time, if you have a specific opinion on an issue, to try to influence others in terms of how you think the issue should go. But then if others have different opinions and a different decision is made, once a decision is made, that's the vote of the board, that's the will of the board, and that's where you go from that point forward to be able to accept what the direction the board's going to take. It's not also then, though, the opportunity to have 3 or 4 or 5 board members meet in the parking lot afterwards and grouse about what happened at the board, and really say the board really should have gone in this different direction. And when you see people in the grocery store, or you see people on the street, some other place in your neighborhood, you really need to say, well, the board really did talk about this. I voiced my opinion. I know it represented the thoughts of other people, but the board in its final decision made this particular decision. That's the vote of the board, and we're moving on from here to be able to work for the benefit of the district. So, that's part of your code of ethics. That's part of the thinking. That's part of the filter that you try to develop as you go around and have your conversations. Thinking too that, again, what's your primary focus? What's in the best interest of the district, as well as representing the interest of students. Knowing also that you have the representation of not the representation, but the attitudes and the opinions and the thoughts of people that you see on a regular basis. And so then you have other statements here too that are part of your board member code of ethics that are important for you to be able to both know, read, and just have a part of your normal everyday business. And part of that is, and this goes with the norms that we passed out earlier too, with the expectation that you're discussing some potentially difficult issues. But it's the issue that's difficult. It's not the person that's difficult. So in terms of if you're upset or something, be upset with the issue. Don't be upset with the person, so that you can treat each other both with respect as well as with your common courtesy in terms of having the conversation, so that you're discussing the issue and not a personality that you perceive or some other type of opinion that you might feel as if is against what you're trying to say. So the importance of listening, the importance of being able to state your opinion clearly and articulately, and then being able to move on with the discussion and making a decision as a board. So comments or questions about this policy?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead. And the back page.
So the issue we're dealing with the staff.
Which one do you want?
I'm trying. I just had it, and then I'm on. Let's see. Okay. Welcome to cooperation and participate teachers administration. Now, as a fairly new board member, I don't ever recall having teachers administrations and all those people come to the board but they come in with like a report from a committee. I'm trying to get the distinction there. I'm not in the school system. I have no kids in the school system, so basically I don't know who the teachers are or anything like that, so I have to look at things objectively. I don't know if that's the right word, but from the outside speaking. And so I would not have any idea what the teachers or have on their mind about the students or anything along that line. I don't feel, and in the reporting, I don't seem to get that information as an outsider. So, I guess, what does that mean? I guess, I shouldn't put my opinion, I'm thinking, what does that mean?
This is specifically talking, this particularly, in developing policies that affect their welfare and the children they serve. So if you have a policy committee, correct?
Yeah.
So as you develop policies, and there are certain policies that require, through a meet and consult process, interaction with teaching staff to be able to, because it does affect their work or how they interact with certain things that happen within the school day. So those educational policies, there's a meet and consult process that needs to happen. There are other times where you may be working on a policy that may deal with athletics, and so you may be requesting the athletic director to come in. There are the others that deal, yes, go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, so this is something that we do often in policy, which is a new committee for you this year, Grant. But if something's coming up, teachers or the development administrator will come in. Or like, for example, in a curriculum, when we would have those teachers come who had been piloting it and tell us how it went when they piloted it. That's kind of what I picture, not us sort of running around the school, you know, poking our heads in classrooms, but that they come to our committees and give their, you know, their feedback.
It's like when we had the cell phone policy we changed last year, we went and we surveyed all of the parents, all of the students, all the teachers. So we do that with all of these big policies. We always reach out and look for improvement.
We usually don't see them necessarily at the business meetings in that way.
I was actually going to use that exact example, and that was big enough that they did come to the board. Like they remembered,
Yeah.
you know, Rick and Sadie both came and talked about why they were making the recommendations on that policy. So definitely the amount of impact that the policy is going to have is often commensurate with how much sort of reflection we get from administration and teachers.
So those are ways that the teachers do have the opportunity to interact, especially with this particular letter O that was talked about. This isn't the development of policies or revision of policies. In terms of ethics and practice, things to think about, remember, represent the entire district when making decisions. Understand the role of the board in terms of what your functions are. Encourage an open exchange of ideas. Seek regular communications. Work with other board members in a conscientious and courteous manner. And avoid conflicts of interest. The conflicts of interest really are the things that talk about you benefiting financially from decisions that are made by the board. I do want to back up a little bit and go to a policy very early on in your packet, and it's numbers 2 and 3 in the right-hand set of handouts. You have, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick question before we moved away from the
Okay.
code. If we were going to do something like signing off together on the code, would that be like a norm, or would that be more of a, it's a policy that?
That'd be a norm.
It would just be a norm. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
What I wanted to have you focus on is the board member authority and responsibilities. It kind of goes back to Gary's question, but it also relates to what we were just talking about. You have your policy, BBAA. What we didn't see in your policy manual was policy BBA, which is school board powers and responsibilities. You kind of shortened it by having your policy BBAA, and you have reference in terms of the legal reference, subsections 1001 to sub 003, which is what I brought up on the state statute book before. Sample policy BBA really does speak to what do the school board members do, and lays it out more specifically than what I've seen in terms of what you have in your policy manual right now. But if you think about that first paragraph as being the school board shall have general charge of all the public schools of this unit and shall exercise other responsibilities as specifically provided by law. The board shall concern itself primarily with broad questions of policy rather than with administrative details, The application of policies is an administrative task to be performed by the superintendent and and their staff, who should be held responsible for the effective administration and supervision of the entire school system. So that's number 3, which is right behind number 2. That's a sample policy from MSMA that, again, as you're reviewing policies, and if you think that having a more clear or defined expectation of what school board members do, it might be helpful even for prospective school board members. They would be able to see that policy to say, okay, well, oh, this is what we do. So therefore, the first part is enacting policy. So policies are very important. School board members typically function at a 20 to 30,000 foot level above what the regular normal acting of what's going on within the school on a normal daily, weekly, monthly basis. So you deal with policy, you deal with issues that are brought to you, to be the governing board, to be able to make decisions about how can we help guide the district in the best direction that we want it to be going. Not to be dealing with the administrative day-to-day goings-on of what the superintendent, principals, and other directors are dealing with within the scope of the day. So another important one is to select, employ, I would say supervise as well as evaluate the superintendent. And that needs to happen on a frequent enough basis so that you know that you've got a good opportunity for conversation between the superintendent and the school board in terms of how things are going, so that you don't have surprises come up in either direction with regard to that. And then it goes through the other specific duties that are provided for by statute, which are in that section that you've abbreviated here, subsections 1001 to 1003. So again, just as a possible addition to that. Go back to here first.
There you go, Penny.
Get ready.
Can you believe I didn't want to keep doing
We
that?
skipped it, it's all right.
I'm going to go to email just for a minute. I don't know that this is an issue here or not, but I do want to talk about this a little bit because this goes to the Freedom of Access Act and how email is both guided as well as controlled. It can be very useful in a school board setting because it is a manner of you being able to get information from your school board chair or from your superintendent, where lots of information is provided to you, and in most cases, all that information is just that, for your information. With the expectation and hope that if it's for a board meeting, that you'll read it and be familiar with it before you come to the meeting. So let me just talk a little bit about that. Your meetings typically are what nights?
Wednesday night.
And when is it that you're able to get the packets for the meeting?
Week prior.
A week prior.
Friday.
So-
Friday.
Oh, Friday?
Prior to the
Okay,
weekend.
so from Friday to Wednesday, you got Friday, then you got the weekend, you got Monday, Tuesday. What we like to say is if you get information in the packet, and if you have a question about any of the information in the packet, and you'd like clarification on that information, reach out to your board chair, reach out to your superintendent, see if you could get some clarification on that before you get to the meeting. Why is that? You want to be as informed as you can be to be able to have the conversation about the agenda items when you get to the meeting. If you have a question about something you didn't think was clear, and you raise the question to the superintendent, if he has enough time, that's why I say we'd like to have you do that at least 24 hours before the meeting on Wednesday, so that if there was something needed to be looked up, explored, researched, or communicated back to you, that information could get to you before the meeting, or at least at the beginning of the meeting, or beginning of that item, so that it would help inform your conversation, which hopefully would then better help inform your decision. So that's a way of trying to expedite, the work of the board. The work of your agenda is really important. And if you have that question, seek the information before the meeting if you can, and try not to bring it up as either as a surprise, or if you had raised that question earlier, then more people would have known earlier, and it can facilitate where you might need to go with regard to that decision making. That makes sense, or I don't know if that's been working that way for you or not, or how's that happen right now? in terms of if you have questions.
That's how it happens.
Yeah, it works pretty good.
Pretty good there.
Okay. Excellent, good. So, in terms of the policy, policy BEA, and again, I don't know that we saw one of those in your, do you have policy BEA in your manual?
We don't, we discussed it at the most recent policy meeting, it felt like it was just restating sunshine law. And so generally, we have had a sort of culture of not repeating what is in law in our policy,
Okay, yeah.
because then if the law changes,
Yeah.
we gotta change the policy. So we just refer to the law and do what the law says we gotta do.
Okay. And do board members have that understanding with regard to use of email?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you're responding, you're not supposed to respond to all.
Correct. Right. And if you do, basically you're beginning a deliberation amongst the board.
We are very adamant about that.
Yeah.
You do get that right.
And it's stated in the emails, don't reply all.
Right.
It's a good reminder though.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, absolutely.
Please don't reply, right?
Or I'll say reply to me
Individually.
directly, yeah, and then, because then sometimes someone will publish something good that I'll be like,
Yeah.
you know, oh, we better get that out to everybody, you
Okay.
know.
Good. The other part, while it is in the Freedom of Access Act, for sure, just making sure that any school-created document, be it an email, be it a text, could be considered a public record. And so it is subject to the Freedom of Access Act, so you just want to be cautious about what you put in writing and being able to share with others. Even if it's not another member of the board, it could be something to do with a topic that you could be subject to a Freedom of Access Act request. So that's cautious. The other thing, yes, go ahead, Vic.
Do you recommend, I see some folks have it, the more I, you know, make connections or chat with someone, email someone at the town, or Town of Gray has it, where folks put it right in like their signature line as a reminder that this email may be considered, or do you feel that's over the top?
I don't know that it's necessary.
It just is.
Yeah.
Just know that.
Yeah, just know it.
Yeah.
The other part of this policy that's not here now, but just to be, and you're probably already aware of this, and you're conscious of this, but be very, very careful about sharing of any type of confidential information. That, you know, students' names, staff members' names, there should be included in the subject line, should not be included in the body of the text. If you have something that's that serious and you need to talk to somebody about it, pick up the phone and make a personal call, or see somebody individually to be able to share your level of concern or whatever your question is. This one, I think, we talk about it, and I share this in lots of different places, so this wasn't a slide, you know, for tonight, but I think it applies in terms of the conversation we had earlier tonight. You know, trust within the community starts with you. And it starts in terms of how you interact with each other, goes a long way in determining your credibility and support in the community. And I know you've had good luck with budgets, and knock on wood, I share that, you know, that good luck as you move forward with that. But really, you want to continue to try to develop this and maintain this and demonstrate that you are a functional body that really wants to do well for your students and support the best interest of your districts. Okay, we talked about that. Certain boards work well together because they do set some goals, they have their strategic plan, and they also have their meeting structures support what it is you want to see happen as a district. And so in this particular way, boards do think strategically as well as analytically, effectively communicating their thoughts with reasons. And that's important for each other to be listening to, as well as to be thinking about how that influences and affects your decision-making on any particular item. It's important to think about how you earn respect with the different groups of key stakeholders. Your town councils, your budget committees, your folks who are supporters of education, as well as those who would like to think that education is spending too much and we need to keep the tax rates down. You still have to earn the respect of those folks to be able to continue to do the work that you want to have done for the schools. Work well with each other. This is what attributes of board members do. working collaboratively with a group who has decision-making authority. You have the decision-making authority, so how do you work with one another to be able to get those decisions made? While at the same time demonstrating your understanding of fiduciary duties. And this goes back to what, is it Francis? Yes. Says, you know, with regard to making sure that, yes, you do have a responsibility to monitor, to not overspend, to only budget what it's felt you needed to be able to do the programs that you want to support in that particular budget year. Understand the difference between oversight and supervision. You have oversight of the district. You have supervision responsibilities of the superintendent. The superintendent has supervisory responsibilities of all things within the district. But your oversight is of things that are going on within the district, and to ask the superintendent to bring to the board meeting reports from the principal, from schools, from grade levels, from different programs that you want to hear about and see about, so that you know that, yes, the system is operating the way you think it ought to be operating. Earn the reputation for emotional maturity, personal integrity, and honesty. That does have to be earned, and then once it's earned, it has to be maintained. And then demonstrate familiarity with knowledge of effective board governance as well as content knowledge for areas for which the board is responsible. So if you go back to that policy, it was on page number 3, those are areas that you were responsible for. And it may take some learning by board members, let's say those folks who are on the finance committee. What does your ED 279 report say? How do you read the monthly budget reports to identify and know, how expenditures are being monitored over the course of time? If you're in policy, what are the statutes that are necessary to be able to know what should be important with regard to policy development or policy revision? If you're on the education or curriculum committee, what information do you need to know to be able to be responsible and effective board members with regard to being contributing members and have an informed vote when it comes time to make a recommendation to the full board. So there are parts here where you as school board members may need to take some time and be informed either by the superintendent, by the assistant superintendent or director of curriculum in terms of how things function within the district. And don't feel as if you can or need to learn that all at once, because sometimes it is a labored process to be, and you only really know what's going on if you've been through the cycle a full year. Sometimes folks have said it really has taken 3 years to be able to get to know, what the real full breadth of the system is, and now you're in your second 3-year term, so you
Still learning.
Yeah, still learning. Yeah, absolutely happens. One other slide that. Again, thinking about working with and for effective school boards, it's important to have you as a board, but also for the district, high expectations and be able to establish clear goals for what it is you want to be doing. Belief and express the belief that all children can learn, focus on achievement, pay attention to collaboration as well as communication with each other, as well as outside of your board. Be data savvy, meaning use data to be able to help inform your decision making. Make sure your goals and resources align. You may have all the important goals in the world, but if your resources aren't aligned to support those goals, the goals are just empty words written on paper. So that's where the money pieces and the physical resources, the other types of resources, personnel resources need to support the goals that you state as a board. Focus on continuing team leadership as well as team training. Now, with everything I've shared so far, is there anything that you heard or anything that you felt that I left out that you'd like to have talked about?
Just one, I know there's a ton of material and we can put in the work of reviewing some stuff in our own time too, but your slide 19, the social media, it's a big red circle without context, so I just wondered if we could talk about that one because we won't be able to take that home.
No.
Your opinion on this.
So that's one that's connected to your slide number, handout number, I think it's going to be 15. I find it here. It would be policy BEB. I'm not seeing it in my packet.
Yep, 15.
Do you have a policy BEB? Is it 16?
Page 15.
There's a couple things, there's 14 and 15 are resources. We do not have a policy, we don't have BED.
Oh, okay. So, this does go with the two handouts in terms of, there are two different resources here.
Okay,
One
great.
from the New York School Boards Association. Did you have one or two? What's that?
We've got the sample policy and then, yeah, a reference guide. So we
What's
do
the sample
have,
policy after? Is it the social media for school board?
board member use of social
Yes.
media.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we do have stuff in there,
Yes.
okay.
That's the one that really references this in terms of how to use social media, and basically it's a matter of, if you use it as a school board, it should be for information. We caution you on using it personally if you're not providing what has been agreed to school board decisions, because it's very often that, and we haven't talked about this in great depth right now, but earlier, but I will right now. Once you're elected, well, you may have, and you still do have, your personal rights. You're technically seen as a school board member 24/7. So if you make a social media post, who's to know, even though you may say, and you may have a statement, you know, this is my personal views and has nothing to do with the MSAD 15 school board, you have information that other people don't have. And so the information that you post may be a result of conversations you've had as a school board member. And so therefore, you know, who's to think, is this really a post from a member of the school board or an individual who just wants to speak about this particular topic? So that's where you'd be cautious, and the over the board, over the top is you just don't do it. If you don't do it, you can't get in trouble with it. If you do it, you know, be really careful and cautious. And one of the things that's in the policy, sample policy that Penny talked about, policy BEB, is don't do things on social media that would bring bad thoughts or bad actions or bad reactions to the school board and to the school district. So you want to try to make sure that you're operating and you're performing your board roles, your board duties in a way that's going to act positively with regard to the school board itself. Does that help, Penny?
Yes.
And then there are other resources in there for sure that you know, support that line of thinking in different ways or different strategies that you can use to be able to think about social, what I say, responsible school committee social media use. Yes, sir.
So that has to do with talking about school stuff, that you put social media and things really into the school. But as school board members, we have another life.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can
That's
use
why I say
social
it
media
doesn't
to talk about.
doesn't take away your personal rights for that.
Okay, just want to make that.
Yeah, just in terms of if you are using it, be careful of how you're using it in terms of how it reflects back on the school and the students. Yes,
I have a
Sam.
question. I've actually been in probably 7 or 8 of these presentations, and I've never sort of thought about this in this way. We, as a school board, we often work on projects that have a relatively long time horizon, right? We want to get a new school built, it takes 10 years, right? The composition of the board changes along the way, right? So I know in the legislature, right, you can't pass a law that ties the hands of the future legislature, right? We are sometimes, you know, laying out a plan for things that are going to happen 5-6 years in the future. How do you sort of counsel boards to think about decisions that were made before I got here, right? Like, hey, we decided to build this new school 3 years ago. I'm coming in on year 3 of this 10 years window. You know, what is the board's responsibility to make sure that I'm cool with it? And then B, sort of, when we look forward, what is our responsibility to future boards not to tie their hands?
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with in terms of not to tie the hands.
That's my question.
Yeah, because I would say that what you do is very different than what the legislature does in a 2-year window. Because basically they have a first year and a second year of the legislature. You intentionally are really building for the future. And even in terms of the policies that you review, develop, and revise, and then approve, maybe a 5-year period that you have a chance to then go back and review that. So you did very definitely are building policy, you're developing policy as a foundation for what you do going forward. So probably many of you, I don't know about Gary,
Nothing predates Gary.
there are probably policies here that were approved and adopted, before you came on the board. But they still apply to you. That whole section of B, those are all policies that relate to you as your duties as school board members. So that does tie you. Now, part of your other question is, okay, well, you've started this project, you're 3 years into a potential school building project, or any other project that you're doing on the board. Part of new people coming onto the board, there's a piece of that that's important with regard to climate and culture. And so what is that climate and culture of the board? And new members coming on, I think you have a responsibility as a new member. What is that climate? What is that culture? How do we do business here as a board? And you kind of find what the rhythm is of making decisions as well as how decisions and discussions happen. And therefore that kind of generates and kind of moves it forward. That doesn't mean that a new member coming on doesn't have their own individual ideas or views about how a certain project might be done. And those ideas and information may be better, may inform, may change slightly the direction of that, or may stop it in their tracks, based on whatever the issue of the project is. But at the same time, that's a decision that the board makes, or the committee then would be making as a recommendation to the full board for the full board to have. So I think culture and climate are important. I think onboarding is important in terms of what is it and how is it the way we do things in terms of our board. Part of that is established by making sure that the norms are followed and kind of, I would say, enforced, but that enforcement really is a soft enforcement in regard to, come on, this is the way we do things here, and we're going to remember that we're going to treat each other both with respect as well as thinking about the future and then moving the district forward. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, Sam, but...
No, I think that's interesting.
Okay, thanks. Other thoughts or questions? Comments?
I just appreciate you being here. I've only been on the board since June, so I'm a work in progress, so this has been very helpful.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? From the superintendent, anything else? One of the things that would help me, and I know that you've been here for a long time today as well, but on the left-hand side, the very, very back of the folder, there is a short little feedback sheet. It would help me, maybe provide some thought for you as well in terms of what things were meaningful or not tonight. And just maybe Penn, if you can collect those.
I can do that.
Okay.
I can put them in the mail, or I can bring them to the
Bring
conference.
them next week.
Yeah,
Okay.
this has been great. And it's interesting to reflect on, to hear a couple of our folks say, oh, I've been to these before, and I'm like, I want you to read every single page to us. This is like thrilling to me because I haven't done this. And then how do we keep track of, setting that culture and climate and spending the appropriate time without redoing the thing that someone's done 12 times before, but
Well, what Sam says, I think, is true. You get new board members come on, and then you don't have one of these, or you do. How do you establish or reestablish, what the culture and climate is? Because you get reelected, and what's your first duty? Well, you get sworn in, and then you come to a meeting, you get the agenda, and you're expected to vote.
nobody even introduces you. On my first meeting, I was like, this is terrifying. This is shocking.
My first
I
meeting.
introduced Adam, but now Penny.
Expulsion?
We had an expulsion my first meeting.
And I thought it was wild and crazy, and then I was the chair, and Teresa came on, and I'm like, sorry, Teresa, we got like stuff to do. And
So Gary brought up another point that is, and while you're filling this out, I do want to take a minute to be able to talk to this. And I didn't speak about executive session very much at all. But you're going to be called into a variety of different executive sessions. The reason for the executive session has to be stated on the agenda, or if it's an executive session that is called through a motion within the meeting, there has to be a very specific statute and citation that has to be read, and you only can be going into executive session to talk about that one specific item. You can't take any votes in executive session. You can have conversation and you can make that kind of a determination, are we good here, or does anybody need to speak more about a specific issue? And also know what direction you're gonna take when you get out of executive session. If it requires a motion, then the motion needs to be stated once you're out of once you're out of executive session. And just as a reminder, you have to vote with a 3/5 vote to go into executive session on the motion that is specifically stated in red. Once you're into executive session, you don't need to vote to come out of executive session. You can just move back into the public session because votes aren't legit anyway. Once you're in public session again, you do have to, if it requires a motion, I mean, if it requires a vote, you need to make a motion, state it, and then vote whatever the motion's going to be at that particular point in time. Anything that's said in executive session stays there. Can't be shared with a spouse, a neighbor, your friend, or even a board member who wasn't within that executive session. If that person wasn't in the executive session to hear what all the other complementary information is. And so they're going to be out, and they're not going to know. But that also emphasizes the importance of, being a responsible board member and coming to as many meetings as you can, being present there and participating in the best way you can. So, with that, I'll let you give your feedback sheets to Penny.
Drop your glasses.
Oh, I did, thanks. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So,
Fran?
yeah, on the public comment page, 19, I guess I never realized that the public can speak at a workshop. I always thought they weren't allowed to speak. I know at the council level they're not, but in our policy, the public is allowed to speak at workshops. And that's, right on line 26 starting.
Yes.
No, not 26.
Yeah, 23. At special emergency or workshop meetings, public comments will be limited to the topics of the particular meeting.
All workshops, yeah. So I didn't know that, so I just read that tonight. So,
Yeah, I did not either.
Well, it's
So
it's
if-
allowed, but it's never been our practice.
but it's in policy.
It's allowed by policy, but not required.
We have policies
That allows
That
it.
allows.
That allows it.
that allows it, that's
And
correct.
our norm as a board, as long as I can remember, has been workshops are for our purposes, they're not public forums.
So this is where I'm gonna have a problem with the norm,
And a workshop is different from a meeting, a business meeting.
because it's in writing.
Our practice has always distinguished between those two types of meetings. We can discuss it and change it, but that's what it's always been.
I do have one question. At the business meeting last 2 weeks ago, it seemed to be the consensus among the board members that for her to speak from the podium as a board member was inappropriate. Was it against a rule or something? I think it was good strategy, but I don't think it was.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought.
Is it against the rule? I didn't know at the time, and I never challenged it.
I'm glad you brought it up because it's something I, like, functionally would love to discuss. I'm doing the best job I can as board chair, but I don't always, I'm not perfect by any means. My working thing there was from the agenda policy. So Fran approached me right before the meeting, as we're sitting down, saying, I have something I want to put on the agenda. And we have had issues with this in the past where it creates chaos. And so I was trying to hold up the agenda policy, which we have a policy on, how things go on the agenda, and you really need to bring it forward, 7 days in advance, we can put it on, we can discuss it on the agenda, get information out. And so I said, we need to talk about this prior to the meeting so we get it on the agenda. And so from there, Fran said, well, I'm going to exercise my right to speak at public comment, which to me felt like an inappropriate use of public comment against a workaround of the policy of you tried to put something on the agenda, I reminded you how we have to do it. And so, to me, it felt like disorderly, you know, the public comment policy also speaks to, you know, they need to be relevant to our business, it needs to be appropriate, it needs to be polite, which we kind of violated in 10 ways from, you know, Sunday at that particular meeting for a full 35 minutes. So that's where I was coming from in the moment of, it felt like a direct workaround of me trying to enforce the policy about putting things on the agenda. And I don't know the rules. I assume that we need to act as board members, and maybe that's a norm. And if you're a board member, you don't switch between being a member of the public and a member of the board as it suits you. But maybe I'm wrong and just stack, you know, what is Robert's rules around that? I don't know.
Let me ask Steve.
Steve, do you know?
He's the professional.
He's still here, well, let's
still
ask
here.
him a question.
The norm is what you had just described in terms of board members sit around the table and you act on whatever the agenda item is. What I have seen, and this may have applied in this particular instance or not, if you had this specific type of item on the agenda, whether you want to put that on the agenda is a conversation for you as a board as well as you and the superintendent to think about in terms of agenda preparation. Some boards do have an agenda item at the end that would speak to potential agenda item, future agenda items by the board, which would allow for, in this particular instance, I would agree, it would have been inappropriate to try to, unless you have, back up a little bit, and I don't want to be scattered in my discussion or explanation, but some agendas, and I didn't look at yours, some agendas have the possibility for adjustments of the agenda. You have that on your... So in this particular instance, if a motion is made to have an adjustment to the agenda and include another item, the board could make a decision to include that or not. Because you also could say no. You don't have to automatically say because the person had said, I want this talked about. That could be a surprise. And what you don't want to have happen is surprises, either from the board to the superintendent, the board to the chair, or the superintendent, you know, to the board in terms of, you know, public meetings. And I would have considered that a surprise. We're not ready to talk about this yet. It's not the night to talk about it. However, if the motion had been made, if you had that on the adjustment to the agenda, it had been made, it had been seconded, and it was approved to be able to talk about that, then yes, it could have been an allowable addition to the agenda for that particular night. Otherwise, I'm sorry, just a minute. Otherwise, it would be at the bottom in terms of possible topics for future agenda items where that topic could have been brought up and then considered to be included or not on the next agenda. Jim.
I've got a non-controversial hypothetical. Let's say I wanted to, as a private citizen, I wanted to leave my desk at the board meeting and go down to public comment and say, Greater Gloucester really needs a pool. Would I be out of line? And I spoke for 3 minutes about why we spend money on this and this and this, but we don't buy a pool, we don't have a pool. Is that, am I overstepping my boundaries as a school board member?
Wait, school board member, and you get up to say we should have a pool?
I get up as public comment and say we should have a pool.
I actually think we've heard this example in some training I've been to, which is, no, you're kind of, it's chaos, you're jumping the line, like you should go to facilities and say, hey guys, can you look at getting a pool? Because I think this is appropriate, like the work is done in committee.
What if you're not on?
We can all attend, all of the meetings, we can all bring anything. You can't vote, like I always attended facilities last year because I was very interested in it and I didn't vote, I was on that committee. You have friends come in finance and I'm coming to finance and we don't vote. So my working understanding was that just like we tell people in the community, if you have a complaint about the teacher, don't go blow up the school board with it, have you talk to the teacher. So have you gone to committee and say, hey, did we have any break, you know, can we look at this? That's what I understand. Gary?
The question is, for me is, and I've seen the same thing happen on my town's select board, is the selectman standing up, taking off his select board hat, and then going to the podium and saying, now I'm talking as a citizen. And I don't think anyone believes, especially a few of these characters around towns, both towns, that they're speaking just as a citizen.
Right.
And I don't think our communities necessarily will separate our role. So you're advocating, so when you go there to talk about a pool, I think you are perceived as a school board member advocating for a pool, which should have been done in committee and other ways. Maybe I'm
I would agree.
wrong.
No,
I don't
I would
think we
agree.
can take our hat off.
Yeah, you're one of the
become a
others.
citizen. I just don't think we can do it. And maybe I'm wrong.
No, I
but-
would agree.
Because right on your forehead, it says
That's right.
school board member.
Right, I mean, you'll run into the same thing when you have parent-teacher conference.
Yeah.
Where you walk in, it's like, oh, you're the school board member's kid. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I've had a teacher actually say that to me in a conference too. So, I just don't think you can do it.
Yeah, and I think there's a perception too that is difficult to be a parent and you have to be very mindful of that role, but that you don't misuse that role. But I think if you're doing your job right, the reality is you often actually have to step back and let things happen as a parent that maybe I would have made quite a bit of noise about as a parent. But the school's gonna see me as a school board member, so
I have to be quiet.
you don't, you know,
I just think
or,
You have to,
yeah,
yeah, you have to.
Still walk the line.
you gotta walk along.
So on that same subject, in the past, I've tried to do just what the rule said, you know, to give notice ahead of time, to put things on the agenda, and basically we rejected. So I can understand business of the thing. This was sort of like an emergency because of all the reaction and interaction on that meeting that really needed to be addressed as soon as possible.
But 2 weeks went by between that workshop, so I felt like we were actually kind of escalating and repeating some of the behaviors because I didn't, 2 weeks went by of silence.
Well, that was the first meeting,
Right, but the workshop, the bad behavior at the workshop,
right?
and then you didn't reach out with that letter and say, hey, can we get this on our meeting in 2 weeks? It was that night. So that was what I was responding to, of like, well, surprises, we're gonna repeat, we're piling on. And that's where I was going.
I hear what you're saying, but from my position of being rejected each time, I just wanted to go ahead because this business had to be dealt with, and that's where it's coming from. I know the rules now, we'll make sure that anything I have to bring up but this issue is not dead yet. This issue is still hanging in limbo. We really have to deal with it, but that'll be at another meeting. That's not for tonight. I'm going to have a hard problem understanding the norm, because I think we just saw a clear example of an interpretation of the law. The law says I can do something, and then someone's telling me we can't because we normally don't do that as a board. But then you shouldn't have it written, we shouldn't have it written in the law that we can do it if you typically don't do it. When you get someone new on the board, sometimes you get things coming from a different perspective. So that makes things, shake up things underneath, and maybe, because I don't think anyone can say this is a perfect board. Things change. There's not that everybody is, you're not looking for wrong. What you're looking for is a different way of handling things. That's all. And it may or may not work. I mean, you have to put it out there to see if it works. So your comment about the norm, if I may say, I don't agree about, well, when I mentioned about the public comment. We normally don't do that. We don't allow in workshops.
It's because our policy says we may. It doesn't say we must.
Well,
So,
okay.
I mean, there's other things in there too. It says we can cut off public comment at 30 minutes.
Which we don't.
It says lots of things that we
No,
don't.
it says up to 30 minutes of
Right.
public comment.
We frequently go over 30 minutes if it's controversial.
Yeah, we went 32 minutes.
That's 10 people. That's 10 people in 3
On a
minutes.
very serious issue, yeah.
So I'm just saying, your norms allow you, unless I'm misunderstanding, a way of moving the business of the district forward in meeting, especially around areas where it says you may or may not do something in policy. Well, we've chosen, as long as I remember, to may not. So that's why policies can be reviewed, and you take it to committee and you make your voice known, and if you don't like something, you bring it up through the right way.
That's,
So,
unfortunately, a lot of my life nowadays is policy. And one thing I will say about policy is a guideline. It's not set in stone. So just like what Gary said, it says it may, it doesn't say it must. So these are parameters and guidelines that policies are written in. Policy shouldn't be made exactly into concrete because it doesn't allow any type of flexibility. So should we have an occasion where we do have a workshop that we are encouraging public comment for certain reasons for a topic that we're discussing that night, or in the future, we may want to do public comment. But I mean, I haven't been here that long either, but Gary, I haven't ever known us in workshops to do public comment.
No, I understand.
And I understand what you're saying, that it says on there that, but just like Gary says, it says we may.
No, it does not.
What-
It
what's-
says will. Will.
It says it will?
It
It
is.
says at workshop we will.
Read it. You have it on page
We will
19.
limit to the topic.
Will be limited to the topics of the particular meeting.
Sharon?
I was gonna say, I think we used the word workshop for different types of things that we on. So those were workshops, and we definitely want to cover. To me, this is
Professional
training.
development training.
Yeah, this is
workshop.
it's like the public starting to welcome. But
And this is still learning of mine because of the norms I've adopted from being on the board, that we never do public comment at workshop, which makes sense to me because we're not taking action tonight. I always assume we do public comment at a meeting where we're building a product or, the bond, we're building an idea, we're doing work, or we're taking action, we're voting, and we always want to hear from the public at that time. This workshop was for us tonight, and I do feel like sometimes it becomes a whole different distraction and sideshow from the work that we have been elected to do to serve the district and the kids. We haven't talked about the kids, guys, in a couple of meetings now, and it's starting to wear on me. So some of my tightening up as our leader is, how can I, within the bounds of our rules and norms, get us functioning into the work of talking about the kids? And I had no intention of doing public comment tonight. I completely was not on my radar.
Well, this is what, like, to Sharon's point, this is for professional development, this is for us to become better as a board. This is a learning session.
So maybe we don't call it a workshop going forward, we call it professional development or training or.
It is a workshop,
I know.
and,
It's
so
not a
maybe
meeting.
we need to look at our policy, because as I've learned from being on policy for a few years now too, is that actually policies are your guideposts, they are your rules, and if your practice doesn't match your policy, then you need to either look at the policy or your practice. Like, we do not ask the teachers to have policy that in practice is not being done. So then we look at changing the practice or the policy so that they match. Does that make sense?
So the only reason to bring that up is because of the workshops that we have, committee meetings, committee meetings
Yeah,
themselves.
meetings, yeah.
We allow public comment, and that, am I making clear that that's allowed, public comment in those meetings, right?
Yeah, I think we always ask for that. I mean, I also assume it
Okay.
needs to be relevant to the work of that particular committee.
Right, exactly.
Or
That's
it
what
can
it
be shut
says.
down.
Yes. Yeah.
Then we'll cut each other some slack.
Thanks, Jim. I could use some. Does anyone else have thoughts they want to share, how we want to use this time? It's 8:30. It's been a while since we had a tidy 2-hour gathering. I don't want to shortchange this discussion by any means, but do we feel it? Does anyone have any? I think I would really appreciate it if everyone would take the time to review the full material. There's a lot in here, and then we can look at maybe what our agenda is at our next workshop. Maybe we can set aside some time for brainstorming what norms we want to maybe put in writing that we pulled out, and then get back to work. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Oh, and if you have a feedback form you want to get to me, I'll make sure to get them back to Steve at the conference.